Hey all, welcome back to my channel, Crafting with Cami. Today we are creating a single page layout, and I was actually inspired from Erin over at Crafty Concepts with Erin. She had created this layout using the SVG file from Close to My Heart, so I am going to kind of use that as my background as well. So I went ahead and cut these book layers out on my Cricut. This is an SVG file that Close to My Heart offers. I did already ink around the edges. I will show you that process in a moment here. That SVG file is still available, so I will have that link down below as well in the description box. Isn't this lettering so cool? I stole that idea from Erin as well. Let me go ahead and show you how I went ahead and did this inking. If you're not familiar with Close to My Heart's cardstock, it is two-toned. So one side is the actual color and the other side is a lighter version of that. So this is shortbread cardstock, and I did the darker color of that on the bottom layer of the lighter pages. So my book is brown, and then the first layer of pages is the dark shortbread. And then I'm using toffee ink to go around the edges, and I'm using my soft bristled blending brush, try to say that 5 times fast, to bring that blending up further onto the page. So I'm starting off on this scratch paper and then in a circular motion just flicking it onto the page, and I am allowing it to go further up into the center than I normally would. It just kind of adds that dimension. It makes the page look more 3D, and it adds that kind of old charm to it. I'm going to bring in that middle layer now. So this one I cut on the light side of shortbread. And then here is that top layer, and that is also in the light color of shortbread. So as I'm setting these aside, I'm keeping them in the right order and right orientation. I'm just going to clean off this brush here, and then I'm bringing in my foam dauber. I'm going to stick with that toffee ink, but I don't want this one to go as far down into the center of the paper as I did with the previous one. So this will just add a little more dimension to this page and help it separate from the one beneath it. So this is literally just inking the edges with toffee. I like the toffee on the shortbread. It just adds a little more color to it than doing tone on tone. Just going to clean that up a little bit and get that put away. And then for the top layers, I'm going to use toffee ink with my blending brush again. So I'm going to add a little more color to these top layers. Just bring that ink a little further in, make it look a little more distressed. And then I'm bringing in shortbread ink, and I have Setting the Scene with these words. I really like this background stamp. Unfortunately, it's no longer available, but if you have any stamps with the lettering on it, that would look really good. So my top pages are shortbread, the light side of shortbread, and then I'm bringing in my shortbread ink. So it's going to be tone on tone stamping. Just going to pick up that stamp here on my acrylic block, and then I like to rub it on my hand just to make sure, one, it's on the block and doesn't have any bubbles under it, and then also it kind of seasons it and gets any debris off of there or any manufacturing powder. So I just tested it on my scrap paper, and I'm actually going to set that under the page. I'm going to do some stamping off of the cardstock so that it looks like a continuous background. So I just brought that white paper back in just so I can stamp off onto it and not get it on my Versamat. I did flip my Versamat over, so the back side is this foam, and when you stamp on foam, it leaves a better impression. The stamping doesn't need to be perfect. I just want to make sure that I don't have it overlapping in too many areas that are going to be showing. The whole book is going to be covered in pictures, so the little bit that's off or not lined up perfect isn't even going to be noticeable. Let's go ahead and flip that Versamat back over, and we're going to be starting on some white cardstock. I like to tack that down so it doesn't move on me, and I just noticed there's a little black mark on that side, so I'm flipping the paper back over, and it got off. All right, we are ready to bring this layout together. So I did cut my book larger than Erin did. She had hers at an angle, but because mine's larger, the corners get cut off if I go at an angle. So my book will be straight. The reason I cut it larger is because I have a horizontal photo rather than a vertical like she had. So I needed a little more room to play with. These are the photos we'll be documenting today. Whenever we're at our friend's house, before they put the kids to bed, the older daughter always chooses a couple books for us to read to her. I'm thinking these 3x4s will go like this, and then I did cut a title out on my Cricut. This is just the base layer that says story time. With these 3x4s, I like that my husband's kind of looking inward towards both of them. So this one that I'm playing with, he's looking at this one that I'm playing with. But there is more counter space on this one here. So then I'm thinking if I put that one up there and this one down, then I can hide that counter, the corner of the counter. But then he's looking off the page in that bottom one. This is the general layout I'm going with, but I do want to bring some paper into the background behind the book. So I'm bringing in the November-December mix-in papers, and these colors are acorn, charcoal, desert rose, mink, sage, and then this one is like mink and white checkered. This is like a sage green. I love the wood grains. So this is what I'll be playing with, and there is a back to all of these, and like the desert rose is desert rose on both sides, just a little bit of different pattern on each side. So I'll be bringing one of these in to the background. The mix-in papers are meant to go along with the collections of that month. So this is November, December, and the colors coordinate with the collections that were released in November and December. Here I'm moving that picture of my husband reading to the other side again. I do switch those two back and forth. So now I have that counter space down on the bottom right. Here I'm playing with the desert rose. That looks so nice with the little girl's blanket. Her blanket is desert rose basically. Here's the other side of that desert rose. It has a smaller pattern to it. And then I'm going to try out that sage pattern. And I like that too. That kind of brings out the green in her shirt and the blanket. These colors go perfect with my pictures. Didn't even plan that. The other side of the sage is kind of like a leaf sprig, which reminded me of winter. So I'm not going to go with that sprig, but I am trying to decide if I want the sage or the desert rose. I do like this zip strip on the sage. The one on the desert rose is okay, but I prefer the one on the sage for this particular layout. I did create this embellishment from an old stamp of the month called Precious Moments. That's where the kangaroo came from. And then I have a stamp set called At the Lake, and that's where the chair came from. I have some other embellishments from these two stamp sets that I'll be bringing in. I did decide to go with the sage cardstock. So I'm just going to bring that behind, and then I'll bring that zip strip in as well. I am liking that zip strip as a transition piece, but I feel like it just needs to pop off the page more. So I'm bringing in some mocha ink, which goes along with the back of my book and then also the Storytime title. So I have one of my foam daubers here. And I'm just going to move everything off so I don't get anything inky. I don't want to get any ink on my pictures. I'm going to ink the one side of the sage cardstock. I don't need to ink around the other three sides since those will be on the edge of the paper. And I'm not going to ink around the entire white, so I just need to do this one edge. And then I'll grab that zip strip. And I noticed there is some paper. It didn't cut the cardstock design completely off, so I'm just taking my micro tip scissors and just touching that up a little bit so that you can't see that extra color there. It's hard to notice that on camera, but I noticed it in person and it'll bother me, so it's probably not too noticeable though. All right, and then we'll go ahead and edge up that side of the zip strip with mocha. All right, we'll set the mocha aside and bring our book back in. And I don't need to waste all of that zip strip, so I'm actually going to cut off that center part. I only need the top and bottom showing. And then I'm just making sure I cut enough that it'll tuck up under the book and there won't be that gap. I'm working on getting all of these layers adhered. I want to make sure that these stay in the right order, right side up. I'm doing all of the adhering flat to the page. So there is going to be a little bit of dimension because you're layering several different layers of cardstock on top of each other, but I'm not adding any other foam tape at this point. It would be really cool if you wanted to add more dimension. You could kind of add some creases and you could add some foam tape to the sides of the paper and make them look like they're coming up out of the book. But I wanted to keep it as flat as possible because I have some embellishing I wanted to do, and I don't want my book to be my scrapbook to be too bulky. I love that the shading and the inking adds that dimension though, so it looks like the book has that texture to it. It has that dimension, but it doesn't. It is flat. I am just using tape. We'll go ahead and finish. I didn't stick that left-hand page down because I wanted to hold this one up and make sure that the creases are together and straight. And I love the letters that are stamped across that. So cool. So there's our base. Let's go ahead and bring those photos back in. There is this arm here, so I'm going to hide the arm, but I don't want to hide the dog. And yes, that is Colin's hand on the dog's head. It looks a little awkward, but I'm not going to try to hide that. It's part of the dog at this point. These two photos, I'm showing that they're facing outward. I'm bringing my title back in. I know I want my title underneath this horizontal photo. So I'm also thinking about where my embellishments would go if my title's there. I'm bringing in that chair from the At the Lake. This stamp set is still available, so I will have that linked. I took my X-Acto blade and I lifted that arm of the chair up so that when my kangaroo sits in there, the arm of the chair kind of covers him a little and it looks a little more natural since he wouldn't be covering the arm of the chair. So now I'm thinking, well, if my kangaroo's there, that'll cover the counter that I was so worried about. So my pictures can be facing in towards each other, and then this embellishment will cover up that corner of the counter. Right about there. I also stamped and thin cut these books from the same stamp set At the Lake. So I just did a whole bunch of them. I wasn't sure how many I would be using. I'll just get them all colored and then we can play around with them. Here's the At the Lake stamp and thin cuts. So I used the chair and the books. And then this is that stamp of the month. I used the kangaroo. And it also has some words on there that might go good with this page. So let's go ahead and get these colored. I'm using my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend markers. I already splotched them out, so I have what the light, medium, and dark colors are, and I'm just trying to match them. So I want to look at them next to that sage pattern paper and next to my pictures, just to see what colors would look best for my kangaroo, books, all of that. So I have the jade green, blue turquoise, and green turquoise colors. Now for my kangaroos, I'm debating whether to use the earth brown, the gold brown. There are two kangaroos there. The little baby, I'd like a different color than Mama. So I am going with the gold brown and the earth brown. I'm starting on the book that the kangaroo is holding. I start with the darkest color, but really I'm not doing a whole lot of shading on the books. They're not large enough to get too detailed with. And then I'll switch to a lighter shade and color in the center. So the darker shade kind of goes around the edges and then lighter in the center. And then we'll just kind of blend it out. There we go. We'll go ahead and do all of these other books as well. I did speed this up quite a bit, but I'm not doing a whole lot of shading. I'm just switching between the 3 different markers and the 3 different shades within them just to make each book look a little different. I got all of the books colored off camera. I'm just bringing my little kangaroo back in. Isn't he cute, all colored up? And I cut out the title in the sage color as well. So it did cut out each individual letter for story time. It all ran together, so that's just one piece, but I'll just get each individual one adhered down. These are those books all colored in. We'll just set those aside. I'm bringing in my Barely art glue. This works great. It has that precision tip. If you have a pair of reverse tweezers, those are amazing as well. So it makes it quick and easy for me to just pick up the title, add a few dots of glue, and it doesn't take very much. There we are. And this glue dries pretty quick. It's nice. It doesn't dry immediately, so you have some time to wiggle it into place. But it does dry rather quickly, so you don't have to wait on that. I'm just finishing getting the title glued down. For the top of the eye, I'm going to use my pickup tool, and it's a wax pencil that it just works great for these little pieces. There we go. There's our title. Let's make sure we get that pin back in the glue so we don't have that drying out on us. I'm going to bring my photos back in, and let's go ahead and get this embellished. So we're hiding that arm with this one, and then this one will tuck right under here, and we'll hide the countertop with that embellishment. I want my title to touch both of these photos, but I also don't want to cover any books or heads. I'm bringing in some of those books that we stamped, and I'd like to hide the legs of the chair so it looks less like a beach chair and more of a rocking chair, lounge chair. But I also don't want it to be obvious and like it's sitting on the books. So a stack of books would be nice. I'm bringing in this stamp set. It's the Sprigs and Sentiments. They do come with the coordinating thin cuts as well. So I think it'd be nice to bring in some greenery. Let me go ahead and get those cut. And then I'm also cutting a circle out of my circle thin cuts. And I'm thinking of tucking this right behind here. And I just want a place to hold my embellishments. I'm bringing the photos level, the 2 3x4s, so that they're kind of in line together. I think they might look better at the same level. I cut a whole bunch of those sprigs. So the circle is actually cut out of the light side of sage, and then these sprigs are cut on the dark side of sage with archival black ink stamped. And I want to include a cluster over by my title, so I'm adding some of the sprigs over there. And then I want to add sprigs over to my kangaroo cluster, and then of course up by that circle. I like to keep the visual triangle in mind, so I brought that circle up as my third point of interest. What I do to one cluster, I like to do to another. So I will be bringing some books up to that cluster, some sprigs down to the kangaroo, and then I brought some books over to the Storytime title as well. I'm bringing in my mocha ink, and I'm just going to distress the sides of the circle just to give that a little more something. So I brought these sprigs back down to the circle. I did speed up this process a little bit. I'm not loving how it's looking. This looks like antlers above my husband's head. The books just aren't looking the way I want them to. I think about covering that little crack so that it's not as much. Yeah, not loving it. So I'm bringing in another retired stamp. This is the Bee's Knees. It's an old stamp of the month, and it has these little flowers. So I stamped a whole bunch of those. They don't come with a coordinating thin cut, so I am going to fussy cut those out. So here's all those little flowers cut out, and you can see up in my book, I added a little bookmark and some sprigs up there. We'll see if those stay. But I thought by bringing in some of those desert rose flowers, it might help just fill in where I wasn't liking the clusters. I'm tucking some of the sprigs and little flowers in between the pages of the book. I think it would look cool if we made it coming out of the book. So I'm just kind of layering up, and then up in this upper right hand corner doing the same thing, tucking it behind that top page. I'm really liking that bookmark up there. So I changed things up quite a bit. So I took that larger circle and moved it down behind the kangaroo, and then I cut a smaller circle for behind the 3x4 photos. Those were already adhered, so I'm making a little bit of a mess here, throwing my bottom right embellishment cluster all over the place. Bringing in this Celebrate Every Moment stamp that is from the Bee's Knees stamp set. We'll go ahead and get that stamped in the archival black ink as well. The sprigs are also stamped in black, so we're just continuing that black ink. And there we go. I am bringing in that mocha ink once again to distress this smaller circle. I did that with the big one, so I just want to bring that into that smaller circle as well. Let's start bringing those clusters back in. So I'm starting with that kangaroo right about there, and we'll bring in some of those books again to hide those legs. So I just want to create a little cluster and make them look like they're stacked on top of each other. So many books to read. Bringing in the sprigs. I like how those flowers kind of finished off that sprig. I used some washi tape on the back of the chair and kangaroo just to keep that kangaroo in place. And then we'll go ahead and get these books down. I am going to pop up some of the books on 3D foam tape. I decided to move this little flower down between the stacks of books, have that peeking out behind the one popped up. Moving along to this cluster, we're going to have some sprigs poking out around the circle as well. So just trying to decide where I want those. While I'm thinking about that cluster, I'm going to move up into this cluster with the bookmark. I do really like how that one looks. So we'll just tuck these sprigs back behind the pages. I am using my Barely Art Glue. It dries pretty quickly. And then I'll just tuck these little flowers back there. It's nice with the precision tip as well for these little embellishments. I did decide to pop this one up on 3D foam tape as well. Moving back down to this cluster, I do play with it a little bit more. I am liking that, but there's just something I'm not loving. So I bring some of those sprigs back down to the title, and I'm thinking maybe just keeping that Celebrate Every Moment very simple. I like how those ones look coming out of the pages there. While I think about that, I'm going to add some stitching to my bookmark. Since I have the black ink on all of the stamps, I thought it would coordinate well with that bookmark as well. So I'm bringing just a little sprig over to that Celebrate Every Moment, and I'm actually going to cut off the bottom. I might be able to use that on another project or elsewhere. So I like it there, but let's try it down here. And I'm liking that. Let's go ahead and adhere the ones on the left by the title. We like those coming out of the pages. And adding some flowers to that cluster as well. And I do want those flowers to poke out of the page. I'm liking that, so let's go ahead and add some glue to those sprigs. Now I have to remember which page it was coming out of. These reverse tweezers are super nice to get into those little areas. There we go. I'm just adding an acrylic block here to help hold that down while it dries. Let's go ahead and commit to this cluster. I am liking that tiny little sprig there with that floral and the little circles. We'll go ahead and pop that flower up, but I am going to glue the stem directly to the page, and we'll add some 3D foam to this little guy. I printed my journaling on Avery clear shipping labels. I just created a text box on my computer of the size I wanted to fill with my journaling, typed it out, put the Avery paper into my printer, and then it just prints out like this. And then I don't want the text box to show, so I'm cutting on the inside of those lines. My journaling will go right down here under the title. You won't see that white, that's just the backing of the shipping label. So that'll go right down there. I got the backing off, and we'll go ahead and stick that down. I like to make sure it's completely straight first. It is very sticky. Once you tack it down, it is there. I have this Cricut scraper that'll help adhere the sticker to the page. As you rub this, the clear shipping label will just disappear into your page, and all you'll be left with is the black writing. We are going to call this layout finished. Here's a close-up of those embellishments. This little picture of her cuddled up to my husband is so cute. She comes up to him at the table. "Uncle, want a snuggle?" Of course he had to say yes. So there is the finished product. I'll leave Erin's video linked below. for where I got the inspiration for the book and all of the shading. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, live a life worth scrapping.